We got some big time breaking news right here on a Sports Talk Nation. Everybody here for the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you, and we got some breaking news as the New York Mets have now settled on a manager, and it is the one and only Carlos Beltran. He will become the new manager, the 22nd manager of the New York Mets. Now, I do have a few thoughts here about this hiring. The first thought is it's a very interesting hiring from the standpoint. Let's talk positive first. It's a known commodity. It's a guy who has played in New York. He played 7 years with the New York Mets, played 3 seasons with the New York Yankees, so he's had about a decade of experience around New York. He knows the New York media. He knows a little bit about dealing with the New York media. He's had some prickly times with them, with the Mets. He's had some good times with them as well. So there's a familiarity there. There's a familiarity from the fan base with Carlos Beltran. The fan base, of course, now, a lot of fans have gotten on Carlos in the past because of the Cold Strike 3 against him in the NLCS back in 2006. But this is a guy who was one of the best players in the history of the franchise. 149 home runs as a Met during his 7 years, set the club record for home runs in a single season in 2006 with 41 until that was broken this past year by Pete Alonso. So he has always been looked upon as one of the best players in the history of the franchise. He has always been considered one of the best center fielders in his era. So you have that guy come here as a manager. He is well respected by a lot of players in Major League Baseball to this day, having retired just recently, now 2.5 years ago, going on 3 years ago in 2017. He was considered in some respects by the Houston Astros when he was there as kind of like a player coach during his 1 year there in 2017 when he won a World Series with that team. So I think from the standpoint of having a guy who has familiarity with the way the game is played today, who has a familiarity with a lot of today's players and their idiosyncrasies, is very, very important. And I think that, from that standpoint, makes Carlos Beltran a very interesting hire from that standpoint. Doesn't mean he's the perfect hire, doesn't mean he's the right hire. He's a very interesting hire from that standpoint. Now, on the flip side, and if you want to have some concerns about this hire, you could say, you could be concerned from the standpoint that here is a guy named Carlos Beltran who has no managerial experience, one, and has no coaching experience, has never coached at any level of professional baseball, has not managed in the minor leagues at all. This is his first shot, kind of like an Aaron Boone, who came out of the broadcast booth having never coached, never managed to take over the New York Yankees. Now, taking over the New York Yankees is much different than taking over the New York Mets, obviously. It's like apples and oranges. So you go to the Yankees if you're Aaron Boone, going from nowhere to a team that's basically ready to win a World Championship, and you win 203 games in your first two years, and you get back to the ALCS this past year, and that's it. So the question for Boone, of course, of the Yankees is, can he get through to the World Series? That is a question going into next year. For Carlos Beltran, he's taking over a team that has a lot of potential, has a lot of talent, has some veteran pitchers now, and DeGrom and Syndergaard. Zach Wheeler, whether the Mets are going to re-sign him or not is a big question. Marcus Stroman, they have capable starting pitching. Their big thing is, do they have enough, can they get some help in a bullpen? And you take a look at this team offensively, there are a lot of nice young pieces. Michael Conforto, Jeff McNeil, Brandon Nimmo, and of course Pete Alonso. A lot of nice building blocks to build around, and the Mets, of course, have to fill in this roster for him going into this year. But, you know, it's not going to be easy coming into New York and managing a team that is just that won 86 games this past season, and was in many ways kind of a disappointment this year because they had built such high expectations, especially Brodie Van Wagenen building up high expectations for this team going into last season, and it did not work out at all. So there'll be some pressure there. There's going to be some tough times, obviously, for Beltran to adjust, especially on a team that, right now anyway, looks like at best, maybe fourth best in this division. You're talking about a division in the NL East where you have the Washington Nationals, who just won a World Series. You have the Atlanta Braves, who are division champions. You have the Philadelphia Phillies, who, by the way, have Joe Girardi, the guy a lot of people feel, and including myself, feel the Mets should have gone full throttle to try to get as their manager, now managing in Philadelphia. So the three teams ahead of them right now are better, at least on paper anyway, and of course the proof is in the pudding with Washington and Atlanta. So not going to be an easy situation for Carlos Beltran to come into as the manager. Another thing that a lot of people are going to say would be a negative would be the fact that it could be conceived as a puppet manager. We've heard that term used a lot because you have a guy who is going to have to be answerable to the front office. The general manager, Brodie Van Wagenen, his staff, the analytics department is going to have a very big say. And this is the case in baseball. You go through all the teams. Chicago Cubs now with David Ross, a player becoming a manager, first-time manager, never coached before. He's going to have to answer to Theo Epstein. Boone, of course, with the Yankees having to answer to Brian Cashman. It's the pattern throughout baseball where the front office runs the show. The difference with the Mets is Brodie Van Wagenen is a guy who's been a general manager and worked in a baseball front office for 1 year, as compared to guys like Theo Epstein and Brian Cashman, who have been doing it for several years, if not decades, for that matter. So it's gonna be fascinating from that standpoint to see how Carlos Beltran adjusts from that standpoint, how much say he's going to have, if any, in the daily lineup, for that matter. Van Wagenen had a lot of say in the lineup last year with Mickey Callaway. Those two came to blows a little bit last year, so we'll see how that's going to work out, how the dynamic between he and Beltran is going to work out, for that matter. So, and keep in mind, Jeff Wilpon's going to have a big say in things too. He's a guy who seems to always have a say in personnel. They'll deny it. They'll say that, you know, this is Carlos's job, this is his team, he'll have final say, but let's be honest, okay? The front office is going to have the final say on a lot of player movement and a lot of personnel decisions and lineups, for that matter. So that would be the perceived negative that we see here with Carlos Beltran being the inexperienced guy. I think at the end of the day, it's a fascinating hire. I'm very curious to see how this thing is going to work out. Like I said, Mets right now, on paper, are probably the fourth best team in their own division. So this will be not an easy task for Carlos Beltran. The biggest key for Carlos Beltran now as manager is what kind of staff can he build here in New York? Can he build a staff that has a veteran bench coach, someone who has had managerial experience as his key right-hand man? The pitching coach, who's that going to be? Is Phil Regan, the 82-year-old vulture, is he coming back to be the pitching coach this year, or are the Mets going to go out there and get somebody else? Larry Rothschild is available. He's not going to Philadelphia. They're going in a different direction. Maybe he comes to the Mets, becomes their pitching coach. Just an idea out there. How Beltran constructs this coaching staff is going to play a big role in how successful he is going to be in his first year as a Major League manager. He has talked about wanting this job. He's talked about wanting to manage the major leagues for a while since retiring, and he's talked about getting veteran guys around him to help him learn on the job, for that matter, as a new manager in Major League Baseball. So Carlos Beltran gets what he hoped for. He said this was the job he wanted, and now he's got it. He is the manager of the New York Mets, and we will see how this thing is going to work out. They're supposed to have a press conference next week. We'll talk about that in another video another time. We'll probably have a guest on to talk about that as well. We'll kind of break that down, debate how that press conference worked out. And, of course, the hot stove season, it's starting to sizzle up, folks. It's beginning already. As the World Series is now officially over, the baseball season is now over, and everyone's going full bore into the off season. Remember to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/OpenMicProgram, at OpenMicNJ on Twitter, and follow us and like us, subscribe right here to the Sports Talk Nation. We'll talk to you next time.